Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican, here once again to bring you the truth with a truth-flavored bias. Today we're taking a look at one of the characters from Cobra Kai Season 4, Terry Silver. Terry Silver debuted in the Karate Kid franchise back in Karate Kid 2, where he appeared as another sensei who helped out Kreese. It is apparent from that movie and from the series that his reason for being a part of the karate world is because of his personal attachment to John Kreese. So in this video, what I want to do is explore his character arc and talk about how he has evolved from someone who was just there to try to win the approval of another man into someone who is taking the lead and establishing himself as the alpha, as the bull queer in the relationship. To understand Terry Silver's psychology, we need to look at his debut, Karate Kid 3. Here, John Kreese is down on his luck after his dojo was defeated at the All Valley tournament. And so he needed help. He had no students anymore, months had passed, he was going broke, so he turned to his old friend, a rich man named Terry Silver, in order to both shore up his business and also to get his revenge against Mr. Miyagi and Daniel. We learn quickly that Terry Silver is ruthless and also a very skilled martial artist. When we meet him, he is living in a mansion and he's also practicing Cobra Kai karate. He seems to be at least as good as Kreese, if not even a bit better. And despite being a very busy man who owns a large company, Terry Silver is willing to put his own life on pause in order to help Kreese get revenge. And he goes really deep undercover in order to do this. He pretends to be someone he is not. So he's really willing to go the extra mile for Kreese, something that is way more than most men would be willing to do for a male friend. Normally, if you're going that far, it can only be if you're seeking sex, and in fact, that is exactly what Terry Silver desires from John Kreese. At the end of Karate Kid 3, the champion that Silver and Kreese put up to represent Cobra Kai, Matt Barnes, is defeated by Daniel LaRusso. And so, their plan was undone, and Cobra Kai did not make a comeback that night as Silver had planned. However, Silver was not willing to give up, and he was ready to keep going, but then John Kreese just up and disappeared. We learned this in Season 4 of Cobra Kai. And then for the next 35 years or so, the two men don't see or hear from each other. Both move on with their lives. With Kreese, we don't know exactly what he was up to, but we do know that he went through some rough times. As for Terry, it might have been even worse. While he still was wealthy, he did not have his man with him. And this also caused him to lose interest in karate and spreading karate, because without Kreese around, Silver really didn't have a reason to continue to try to push Cobra Kai, although he did have the skills to teach it and also the resources to open dojos. By the time we meet Silver in Season 4, he is deeply depressed and he seems old beyond his years. You can tell just by how much younger he seems once he meets Kreese again and that fire is ignited in him. But when we first meet him, he just seems old and depressed and slow. And while he does have a homosexual haircut with the long hair, and a ponytail is also a homosexual haircut, there's still a difference in the kind of demeanor that he has and the energy that he puts out. So we can see that without Kreese around, Silver can't really be who he is supposed to be. And that shows us that clearly Terry Silver is in love with John Kreese, and that is the central truth of his life. Not only does Silver putter around his mansion and play piano, but he also has a younger girlfriend named Cheyenne. Now, I think most people would agree that Cheyenne is a pretty attractive woman, and most guys would feel pretty lucky to have a woman who's probably, 20 years younger and pretty attractive. And so we would think that Silver's happy with his life if he seemed interested in what she was saying, or if we saw a sex scene between them. But instead, he's just kind of ignoring her and she's basically just there as his beard. He wants to blend in, he wants to be normal. In his life, he's been in Vietnam, he's been a POW, and then he went through the heartbreak of losing Kreese. So Silver is just trying to hide in plain sight, I guess you could say. But then as soon as Kreese reappears, not only does that reignite Silver's passion for Kreese and karate, but also it makes him forget all about Cheyenne completely. And in fact, we see that he ghosts her. And this is a guy who's probably old enough that he doesn't know what the term ghost means. But that's exactly what he does. He ignores all of her calls and text and just apparently cuts her out of his life completely. We also learn because of that apparently they don't live together, otherwise there'd be no way that he could evade her that much. So, yeah, she was a beard and a pretty superficial one to begin with. Now, while he's on all his antidepressants, he'd wear his hair down and then mope around his mansion, but once he puts his hair up, that's a signal that he's going to work, because the down hair is like when a girl is just around the house, but up hair is when she is out going to work and being professional, and that also applies to homosexual men. So that is Silver's way of indicating to the audience that he is ready for action. And also, it represents that he's ready to go out and get Kreese, because at first he wasn't sure. When they have the confrontation in the dojo, where Silver's hair is still down, he's basically just angry that Kreese walked out on him, and he's still sort of weighing his options. But once he puts the ponytail in, this means that he is going to forge a path with his one true love, John Kreese. In Season 4, Kreese doesn't come to him anywhere near as desperate as he was back in Karate Kid 2. He is on his feet, more or less, and he's got a dojo, he's got a good group of students, but he does need a little bit of help with instruction. So you would think that Silver would approach him as an equal, but not as someone who is desperate to win his approval. Yet, that's exactly what Silver does. Silver goes way out of his way to try to win over Kreese. And again, just because of how much resentment Silver had from the 1980s, you would think that he would only put in a little bit of work or even say no, but instead he pours himself in just as hard as he did back in the 80s. If we go back to Karate Kid 3, Silver not only played sugar daddy to Kreese and really tried to impress him and overwhelm him with his wealth and power and success, but he also took the lead. In Karate Kid 3, Silver's the one calling the shots all the way through. And Kreese just kind of stands there and goes along with it. Kreese becomes Silver's right-hand man instead of the other way around. And a lot of that is because Terry Silver, as a businessman, is a more natural leader. It takes a lot more charisma and talent to be a businessman than it does to be in the Army. Because in the Army, you have your rank, and then that gives you your authority. You don't actually have to really do any leading or inspiring. But in business, you do. And Silver was clearly very good at business and had a lot of charisma. And for some reason, he kept deferring to Kreese's old rank of captain for no reason. That's not something that he did in 1985, when that rank was still much more meaningful, when they weren't as far removed from the war that they fought in. But rather than treating Kreese as an equal or even a subordinate, which is basically where things stand now, Silver instead treats him like a captain. And the reason is because Silver has a sexual fetish for men in uniform. He wants to go back to the days when he saluted Kreese and he looked up to him and he held that kind of latent attraction to an older man. So Silver's in a weird situation. He's desperately in love with Kreese, and he thinks that if he submits to Kreese that will win him over. But at the same time, Terry Silver is dominant. He's a businessman, he's a bull queer, and he needs Kreese to be the one to submit to him. But so his thinking is if he submits first, then he can switch things a little later. So this is an inversion of what he did in Karate Kid 3. In every relationship, there's a kind of power dynamic at play. And Terry Silver is trying to adjust the dynamic that he has with Kreese. And the way that he does that is by setting up the weaknesses competition. And the purpose of it was not to show the weaknesses of the students. Terry Silver couldn't care less, but rather to try to figure out what Kreese's true affections were. Because your weakness oftentimes indicates what your affection is. So, as he's testing Kreese, he realizes that Kreese's weakness is Johnny Lawrence. Therefore, his affection lies for Johnny Lawrence and not for Terry Silver. So Silver kind of suspected this to begin with, and it's heartbreaking for him to deal with. So as another test, when he orders new uniforms for the Cobra Kai students, rather than going with the traditional red and yellow colors that they had borrowed from Hulk Hogan, instead, Silver made the Cobras silver, because his name, of course, is Terry Silver. And this should be something that Kreese would notice, because it's a noticeable enough change. But he doesn't, and that's because clearly Terry Silver and what he's doing is not on Kreese's mind. Kreese is much more preoccupied with Johnny Lawrence. So it's at this point that Silver decides that he needs to make a sudden move on Kreese in order to really get his attention and assert his dominance in order to save the potential of a relationship. I mean, at this point, both of these guys are about 70, and the clock is ticking. And Silver has been waiting for decades at this point. He had given up hope, and now Kreese is back in his life. He's got to do something, and so he decided to do something that is, frankly, desperate. Like a true Cobra Kai, Terry Silver struck first, struck hard, and showed no mercy. His first power play was to show Kreese that he is superior to Johnny Lawrence. To do this, he decided to lure Johnny Lawrence into a dojo and beat him up in front of Kreese. He also outsmarted him in order to get him there in the first place. So clearly, Silver is superior to Lawrence. He has more money. He goes back further with Kreese. He's closer to being an equal. He is a better fighter, and he's far better of a schemer. He adds things to the relationship that Johnny Lawrence couldn't. Johnny is not really what we'd call a thinker. Kreese is. Johnny is poor. Kreese is rich. So you'd think that this would be a pretty convincing display, at least in terms of the way that Silver thinks of what makes someone an attractive partner. But Kreese was not all that impressed with that. He did see that Silver is powerful, but he kind of already knew that. But he only sees Silver as a friend. Silver's kind of stuck in Kreese's friend zone. And by the way, we have no reason to think that Kreese is particularly committed to heterosexuality, given his obsession with Johnny Lawrence, because we only know of one relationship he ever had, and that was about 50 years ago. So in the meantime, he's been mostly hanging out with men in the army and then at homeless shelters, and there's a pretty good chance that he's developed a gay streak because of all that. So anyway, after that play failed, Silver got drunk and he was really depressed. And then Stingray showed up at the dojo to beg to get in after Kreese had really shot him down. Now, Silver saw an opportunity. He knew that the only way to really get with Kreese was to break Kreese down and force him to beg. Because part of their relationship up to that point had been that Kreese held the power because he had been the senior officer in Korea and he had gotten Silver out of the POW camp. So, what he did was he beat the shit out of this guy named Stingray, and then he gave Stingray instructions to say that the person who beat him was John Kreese. So Silver then had Kreese over for dinner. They were celebrating, and they brought up the topic of weakness. Silver basically tells him the reason why you're weak is because of Johnny Lawrence, and he almost tells him that this is why bad things are going to happen to you. Then the cops show up, he gets arrested, and basically that's it. So Silver is claiming that he has shed himself of his weakness, and that really raises a big question. So we know that he cast aside his Terrence persona with the longer hair and the piano playing and the beard called Cheyenne, but his real weakness was always Kreese. So the question is, there are two options. Did Silver decide to expose Kreese and get him put in jail in order to make a power play and force Kreese to come begging, which I think is most likely what happened? Or, and I think this is not quite as likely, but also pretty plausible, was Silver trying to cure his own homosexuality by breaking down, diminishing, and devaluing the man he was in love with? Either way, it's clear that Silver was confronting his own weakness, which is John Kreese, and we'll see whether he goes forward being a homosexual or a heterosexual, and that will determine what his purpose was. So we'll know if he gets back with Cheyenne that he was trying to get rid of his gay side by getting rid of Kreese, or we'll see that if he remains a homosexual and remains interested in Kreese, that what he's trying to do is to assert his dominance and change the dynamic of their relationship to basically make Kreese his bitch and then use Kreese as his concubine. So anyway, this is the kind of morality that you see at play in Cobra Kai. I expose this kind of stuff not in order to praise it or in order to advocate for it in any way, but rather simply to expose the commune queer agenda on television. This has been Remarkable Republican, bringing you the truth with a truth-flavored bias. Signing out.